I get to be recorded.
Yep.
Ooh, now I'm all modest. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So my first question is like, what was your like job in the military, just in general?
I was a Navy corpsman,
Okay.
which is essentially the medical folks of the Navy. Most of my job was medical care, and I was in what's called expeditionary medicine, which meant that I was part of a fleet hospital unit, which was essentially a hospital the size of Wesley in containers on a ship. And if something happened, we would go and set it up somewhere. We also did medical supports in, like, I did medical relief missions in Togo, Africa, and in the Honduras, where we go in, we stay at one spot, and every day we go out to do a different village and do like medical care, well baby, women's health, immunizations, and just had a clinic that we would set up for the area villagers.
Okay. And then you said you were you were at Desert Storm, or you helped out in it?
I'm Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom.
Okay.
I served in Bahrain in Desert Storm with the Fleet Hospital Unit. And then in Iraq, I was assigned to the Marine Expeditionary Force Surgeon Cell, which is essentially the doctor in charge of all the Marine forces in theater.
Okay.
I did kind of medical intelligence, and I was a medical liaison for the Brits for a while.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
I had all sorts of fun jobs.
Yeah. Okay, so can you tell me a little bit more about Desert Storm, like what it included?
For Desert Storm was really, as far as military operations, was incredibly one-sided. Of course, the Iraqis kind of did a sneaky, we're coming in to do a medical or military exercise, and all of a sudden we took over Kuwait. And then because of the oil fields and all that, there was a stopping action to keep them from going into Saudi Arabia or worse. And then in January, we started the air campaign. Iraq had the fourth biggest army in the world at the time. Mm-hmm. So not wanting to go first biggest army versus fourth, we went ahead and softened them up. And then, of course, they had the ground campaign starting in March, which lasted all of 100 hours.
Okay.
But we were worried about the number of casualties. At one point, before the campaign was really started, they estimated we would suffer somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 military casualties on our side. So we had, in theater, we had 2 Army hospitals that were 300 beds each, and we had 3 Navy fleet hospitals that were 500 bed each.
Okay.
And we were in the one that was happened to be stationed further back in Bahrain. We were probably from Kuwait about 200 miles straight distance. But what would happen is any casualties we'd have would go to like an aid station to a surgical company, and then they'd be flown to us from there.
Okay, so did you see any action at all, or was it just mostly casual or injured people?
Most of it was injured. The closest to action I saw in Desert Storm was during the last day of the campaign before everything stopped. Saddam Hussein had a nasty habit of sending up Scud missiles. They're surface-to-surface missiles. Mm-hmm. The joke was where do you find them? It's one person to aim the missile, one person to light the fuse, one person to watch CNN to see where it lands, because they were not the most accurate things. Mm-hmm. But one hit a barracks in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. We were probably about 30 miles from that, so we were sent over there as a triage team. So we went in and triaged casualties, and we sent them to one of the hospitals that were nearby.
Okay. Do you have any like memorable stories of anything you've seen, or maybe any really bad injuries that you saw?
Bad injuries. We had a few. We had a couple again combat casualties. One soldier who was seen by us, it took a a 50 caliber round, which is a big round. It went through and through his chest, and they didn't think he was going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
They brought him to us. We were able to stabilize him, and it was a long kind of. We had him for about an hour and a half in the casualty receiving, stabilizing him so we could send him to surgery. But really, in Desert Storm, we had very few combat casualties. I want to say that there were under 200.
Mm-hmm.
We saw other casualties, but if you figure the U.S. and coalition forces had over 300,000 people in that area. It's a big city, so we had all the medical things. We had more car wrecks and people injured from car wrecks than we did combat casualties.
Okay. So, yeah, about that. So you said you went into like the villages more. What did you do in there, really?
What we would do is we would set up a medical clinic. When we do these, we work real close with the State Department, and we get a rather large amount of medicines and things like that. One of the doctors we had with us was an eye doctor, and he worked close with the Lions clubs. And for Togo, we had about 75,000 pairs of glasses that went with us. And then in Honduras, I think we had about 50,000. So what we do is we have to go through, categorize them. These are kids' glasses, these are adult, these are women's, these are men's, and these are the prescriptions. And we had, almost every prescription known to man. So with that, we would set up the clinic. We'd get the do the eye vision for them, and then give them a pair of glasses. In the medical clinic, they would come in with whatever the problems were, and then like a lot of it were just aches and pains and all that. So we would give them Tylenol or Motrins. If it was an infection, we had antibiotics, and we had other meds to help start them on patient care or on medical care. In Togo, it was real interesting because I don't know if when you were in school, did they ever show you all the really weird diseases of like Africa, like elephantiasis and things like that?
Not
when
really.
I was in school, those were the real cool films to show us. And elephantiasis is one that's over there. It's kind of a disease that affects the lymph system, and their legs get real swollen. Way back when, there was nothing you could do for it. Your life is going to suck. Mm-hmm. Now we have medications we can give them, and we could, in a few of them, in fact, the first village we went to, we had the village chieftain had elephantiasis, and we were able to get him on the medications and everything. That by the time we left Togo, which was 14 days later, we went over, because he is the village chief. We went out, our doc went out and did a personal visit to him, and found out he had been on a good road for recovery. So we did that. There were a lot of sad stories there too. Mm-hmm. The worst one that we had this woman who, she was end stage AIDS. She had an 18-month-old child that was also HIV positive, end stage AIDS, and we couldn't tell them. We couldn't do anything for her. Mm-hmm. We're looking at it. We gave her comfort medications, but there was nothing we could do for her, and that was kind of one of the tragic things we saw.
Yeah. So do they not get a lot of medical attention there normally?
Very little. In Togo, the docs didn't come to you. You had to go to them, and in some of the villages where we would travel about 2 hours a day to get to a different village, and for them it was probably a full 2 days walk to like Togo or to Lomé, which was the capital, or one of the other provincial cities, because you have the big city of Lomé and 2 smaller cities, and the rest of the country is very, very rural with just these little villages that probably have maybe 200 people in them, and they literally have what you consider in African, the mud huts with straw roofs and all that, just a conglomeration. Most of the time we were dirt roads to get there, and some of them were rather impressive.
Really? Okay. Let's see. How long did you serve for?
Well, Here's where it's fun. I started out as a medic in the Army. I joined the Army in 1981. Was reserve after getting off of active duty. I was in the reserves till 1988, and then I'm a paramedic now. So the Navy, I could do more in the Navy as a paramedic. A buddy of mine was saying, "Hey, come on over to us." My Army enlistment was up, so I transferred to the Navy in '89, and I did 19 years of Navy duty. So I did a total of 26 years of military duty, most of it reserve. But I was, like I say, reserve Navy from '88 to 2007.
Okay. And do you still keep in contact with a lot of the people you met there?
Some. The big problem is with the reserves. It's kind of a ebb and tide. There's some folks. I keep in track with some of the folks, but there's others that I haven't seen for years.
Let's see. Okay, think of some more questions. Did you? Let me think. So, did you get were you a paramedic before you went into the Army, or were you trained as a paramedic there?
I went into the Army as a combat medic, came off of active duty, got my EMT, and then through the EMT program, got my paramedic, and then transferred to the Navy. So I got my paramedic came out of the civilian side of the house.
Okay. So, okay. Let's see. Do you ever plan on going back into the Army, maybe, or even the Navy, possibly?
Oh no, I'm retired.
You are? Okay.
Yeah, I have a total retirement from the Navy.
Okay.
So
even if you want to go back, couldn't?
After 26 years, they said bye. They have what they call high year tenure, where as you get promoted in ranks, you can have so many years in the Navy. For instance, as a E6, you can be in, which is a first class petty officer, you can do 20 years of duty. Mm-hmm. As an E7, you can do 26. If you're not promoted after your 26th year, you're essentially said it's time for you to retire.
Okay, so this is kind of like an optional job for you. Would you not really need to do this job? Would the government keep you retired?
Being reserve, you don't see a retirement until you turn 60.
Okay.
You don't get paid. Now, if you're active duty, if I did 20 years of active duty, then I see a paycheck every year, every month. But I don't get a paycheck now until I turn 60.
Okay. What was your favorite part about being in the military?
Most of it was the people and the assignments. I enjoyed a lot of the folks I worked with. I worked with some real good people. And again, when we did the medical missions, there were, like I say, there was a lot of sadness and tragedy out of those. But there was some really cool things. We had and again, one of them was two of them with a vision, is when we were in the village of Hanpu in Lome in Togo, we had this elderly woman who was in her 70s who had two other villagers that brought her into to the clinic area, and they took her to the eye clinic. And my job there was I was a kind of a supervisor, so I got to move around a lot. And so she came out of the optometrist area, and it's just looking around, and there's tears flowing off her face. She was 77 years old, had never seen clearly her entire life. And the doctor was able to not only correctly identify her vision issues, but we had a pair of glasses that were exactly what she needed. And she's out there. This is the first time in her entire life she had seen clearly. And in Togo, the native or the national language is French, and so she's just looking around, going, "C'est beau, c'est beaucoup c'est beau," which is it is so beautiful.
Wow.
And that was cool.
Yeah.
It had a little girl in Honduras who, I can't remember the name of it, but instead of being cross-eyed, her eyes kind of go out. And again, it was kind of real cool because we not only found these set of glasses that were exactly what this little girl needed, which was a very, very rare prescription. But they were little girl glasses, and they were pink.
Oh.
And it was great to see the look on her face after she got those glasses and could see well again.
Yeah. So you guys are really just helping out those people so much.
Mhm.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they don't get that.
No, they
Much
don't.
at
And
all.
you like I say, you see a lot of sadness. You know that you're helping them, but how far is it going to go? But you know you've made an impact in their lives. So that makes it worth it.
Yeah. And this is funded by like the U.S. government. Is it like because like why do they do this?
It has several reasons why they do it. One, for us, it's what we call a mobilization exercise. As a unit, we've guarded the people together that are going to be in this detachment that we're sending out. As the personnel in the detachment, we have to plan the whole operation, from travel to how to assemble folks in country, movement within the country, security, all the supplies we need. We have to do what we call RSOI, reception, staging, onward integration. We have to pay for it. So we benefit from the experience and the knowledge of, if something happened, we had to move our unit to, let's say they decided to move us to Afghanistan when I was still in. We have the personnel with the knowledge, and skills, if you will, but more important, the networking to be able to move that unit. Part of it is also funded by the State Department, because what better way to show us as decent people than go in and provide medical care to these facilities, to these people. When we were in Togo, we were the first military unit outside of the Togolese army that were able to go into that country and provide care. So, and that one was great. Like I say, even though it had its things, if I really don't ever want to go back there and visit, but it was very valuable to be there, because you got to see what a true third world country was. And you could see the problems and all that the folks had. But the Togolese Navy had been very, very secretive with their equipment. In fact, we worked very close with the U.S. Embassy in Togo, and we had a reception for us at the Togolese Navy base. And they're showing us their patrol boats and all this. And after that, the ambassador's going, "Wow, I haven't even been on those ships." So we had a good, because we were Navy, we had a good intermediate relationship with them.
What kind of training do you have to go through to become a medic in the Army? Is it like normal boot camp training?
You go through boot camp, and then you have to go through a class. It's in the Navy they call it an A school. In the Army they call it AIT, Advanced Individual Training. So you go to boot camp, and then you get sent for medical. You go to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and they actually have the training battalion that you're assigned to a company, and you go through the classes and all that with that company. When you finish that, of course, they have various testing and all that. After you've completed the course, if you're active duty, you're going to get sent on to an assignment somewhere. If you're reserved, you get sent back home for your own unit.
All right. I think that's about all I really need to ask you. Is there anything else you wanted to add, maybe? All right, well.
I've always had fun with the Navy, though.
Yeah, really?
Actually, I had fun in both. I went more places with the Navy. With the Navy, you have to do your 2-week training, but we have certain requirements you have to do every so many years. But through the Navy, I went to, say, Togo, Africa, Honduras, Korea, Japan, Scotland, and spent time also in Italy and Spain.
Okay.
And then reserve-wise, I also got to go and work at a Navy hospital in the EMS section in Charleston, South Carolina, San Diego, and up in Washington. So got to do a lot of traveling with that too, and it was a lot of fun.
How long would you stay in each
2
area?
weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah, as reserves, you have to do a 2-week annual training, and then you do your reserve training 1 weekend a month. But the way the Navy would do it, you're back. is you could, depending on what you were doing, you could actually not drill for 3 weeks or 3 months, and then do a week at a facility if they had the money to send you out there. Like I went out to Charleston for a weekend, and then went out there for my AT, and then they activated me during Hurricane Andrew, and I backfilled in Charleston for about a month,
Okay.
just working work DMS.
Yeah.
So it was good. It was good duty. I enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
that's pretty cool. All right. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
That was really interesting, actually. That'd be really cool. I actually thought about not being a medic in the Army, but we've been studying about it so much that it just sounds really interesting, like what you would do and everything.
And it's varied. Some folks, depending on sometimes it's a roll of a dice. Some folks get really good assignments. Others get kind of crappy assignments. Where and it's a lot of it's what you make of it too. I always say the Navy. This sounds terrible to say. The Navy, even though the recruiters will tell you this, you know how you can tell a recruiter's lying to you? Their lips move. No, actually, they're not lying to you, but they're not going to give you everything you know. Like, could I be, if I walked into a recruiter, I'm an 18-year-old, and said, I want to be a Navy SEAL. They said, you can probably do that. What they're not telling you is all the things you have to do to be that. And they're not going to tell you that unless you give them the specific question. They're not going to tell you, yeah,
Really?
you can do it, but these are the steps you have to do. And you have to have like absolute perfect PRTs or physical fitness scores. You have to be in the top of your class at boot camp. There's steps you have to take. They're not going to tell you that. And then they're not going to tell you is how hard it is to get into the class, which is difficult in its own. I have worked with SEALs. I am not one. I am not a Special Forces ninja, but I did medical support for them. I worked for a Special Warfare Unit 2 in Scotland, which was a lot of fun in its own right.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you could like apply for the Army or for the Navy in hopes of becoming a SEAL, but you could not become one.
You can go down what they call the career track for Navy SEAL, but it's very, very difficult to get into. And again, there's requirements, and like say, I don't know the requirements. Are you looking for a place to pee? Do not pee in my office.
What's he eating?
It's an M&M.
Ew.
Ranger,
Yeah,
come
dogs and chocolate. No.
Ranger. Come on. Good boy.
Okay.
But you can join, like say, depending on the job you want. You've got a certain track that you're going to go down. And I always say, it's like say the Navy, actually the military in and of itself, is looking for a person to fill a spot, a billet. They don't care who that person is. It just happens to be you. Once you're in there, the command is going to be caring about you. But the Navy, that sounds bad to say, but the Navy doesn't care who's doing the job as long as we have somebody doing it. But once you're in it, it's what you put in is what you get out. And say they're going to use you for what they need you. So I always say use them for what you can. Get those other experiences. For instance, we have folks that are like the folks that are Navy corpsmen. We encourage them to use the Navy to get their paramedic and all that while they're on active duty. That way they come out, because there's not a state in the Union that recognizes combat medic from the Army or the Navy corpsman as an equivalent within the civilian world because of certifications and all that. Let's say you get the EMT, you get the paramedic. When you come out of there, then you have a benefit and let the Navy pay for it. Other career paths, for instance, aviation personnel, somebody who's an aviation mechanic, they can come off of active duty and find a job in the aircraft industry just overnight. In fact, the aircraft industry love them.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You are getting into mischief. You are getting into mischief.
Yeah, that's makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, thank you.
My pleasure.
Again, that was really good. I'll pause that.